The prisoner transfer ceremony took place on a neutral space station, orbiting a dead world halfway between Earth and the former Crythian core territories. It was a symbolic location, chosen carefully by diplomats from both sides. High Commander Zargoth and 400 of his senior officers were being released after serving 2 years in human custody. Captain Elena Rodriguez of Earth's diplomatic security force stood at attention as the Crythian prisoners filed past. They looked different than they had 2 years ago. Still massive, still imposing, but something in their bearing had changed. They moved with less arrogance, more awareness. Prison had not broken them, but it had taught them something. Zargoth was the last to leave. He paused in front of Rodriguez, studying her with those alien eyes that had once looked at humans with such contempt. She met his gaze steadily. "Your people treated us fairly," Zargoth said, in heavily accented English. He had learned the language during his imprisonment. "Better than we treated yours at New Providence." "I still don't understand why." Rodriguez considered her answer carefully. "Because we're not trying to be monsters. We're trying to be better than that, even to our enemies." "Then you are either very wise or very foolish," Zargoth replied. "Perhaps both." He straightened to his full height and gave her a formal Crythian salute, fist to chest. "I hope we never meet in battle again, Captain. But if we do, I will remember this day." She returned the salute, human style. "So will I, Commander." Back on Earth, Secretary General Okonkwo stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing not just the representatives in the room, but the entire human population watching from across dozens of star systems. It had been 5 years since the Battle of Sol. 5 years since humanity revealed its hidden fleet and changed the galactic order. She was giving her final address before stepping down from office. "We did what we had to do," she said, her voice carrying across billions of screens and speakers. "We prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. When the worst came, we were ready. But now we face a different challenge. How do we use our strength? What kind of power do we want to be?" She gestured to the screens behind her, showing images of human ships patrolling trade routes, protecting cargo vessels from pirates, human engineers helping former Crythian colonies rebuild their infrastructure, human doctors providing medical aid to species that had never had access to advanced health care, human teachers sharing knowledge and technology. "We could have conquered," Okonkwo continued. "When we revealed our fleet, we had the power to dominate the galaxy. We could have imposed our will on every species we encountered. We could have become exactly what we fought against. But we chose differently. We chose to protect rather than dominate, to share rather than hoard, to lift others up rather than push them down." In the audience, young Lieutenant Marcus Webb listened carefully. He had been one of the first soldiers to board Zargoth's flagship, and the experience had changed him. He had seen the fear in the Crythian crew's eyes, the same fear humans had felt when they were the weak ones. It had taught him something important about power and responsibility. After the speech, he found himself at a recruitment center in New York, talking to applicants for the Solar Defense Force. The military had expanded enormously over the past 5 years, but the selection standards remained incredibly high. A young woman sat across from him, eager and nervous. "Why do you want to serve?" Webb asked her. "To protect people," she answered immediately. "Any people, not just humans. Everyone who needs help." Webb nodded approvingly. That was the right answer. That was the only answer they wanted to hear anymore. Across the galaxy, the changes continued to ripple outward. The Valorian Confederacy, once barely able to defend itself from raiders, now fielded a small but effective fleet equipped with human technology. Earth had shared defensive systems, nothing that could threaten established powers, but enough to ensure smaller species could protect themselves. The gift came with training and one strict condition: the technology could only be used for defense, never aggression. The Crythian species itself had fractured after the war. Some systems embraced the reforms, establishing democratic governments and focusing on peaceful development. Others clung to the old imperial ways, bitter and resentful. But even the bitter ones had learned to be cautious. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted permanently. On a space station in the Centauri sector, a class of mixed-species military cadets gathered for their tactics lecture. The instructor was a veteran Crythian officer named Velkara, who had fought at the Battle of Sol and survived. She had joined the new Council Defense Initiative, a multinational military force created after the reforms. "Today, we study the Battle of Sol," she announced, bringing up a tactical display. The students, representing a dozen different species, leaned forward with interest. Everyone knew this battle. Everyone had studied it. But learning from someone who had been there was different. The humans won before the battle even started, Velkara explained. They won through patience, planning, and understanding their enemy. They knew we would underestimate them. They knew we would rely on our traditional advantages. They spent 50 years studying our weaknesses while we never bothered to learn about their strengths. A young human cadet raised her hand. But didn't we win because of better technology? The railguns, the computers, the engines? Technology helps, Velkara agreed. But it's not everything. We had technology. We had powerful ships and weapons. What we lacked was adaptability. We fought the way we had always fought because it had always worked before. The humans fought in ways we couldn't predict because they studied us and we didn't study them. That's the lesson. Never assume you know everything about your opponent. Never stop learning. Never stop adapting. In a quiet laboratory on Mars, Dr. Sarah Chen worked on the next generation of human ship technology. She was part of a team that had developed the railgun systems that had changed galactic warfare. But her current project was something different, something she hoped would never need to be used. Her colleague, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, looked over the schematics with concern. Are you sure about this? If we keep developing new weapons, we're just starting an arms race. Sarah nodded slowly. I know, but the galaxy needs to understand something. We revealed one hidden fleet. That doesn't mean we've revealed everything. As long as potential enemies believe we might have more surprises waiting, they'll think twice before attacking anyone under our protection. So we're building a deterrent? We're building insurance, Sarah corrected. The best way to avoid war is to make the cost too high for anyone to consider it. That's what we did with the Sol Defense Network. That's what we'll continue to do. Not because we want to use these weapons, but because we never want to need them. On Earth, in the Australian outback, children played in a schoolyard under a bright sky. Some were human. Others were young aliens whose families had immigrated to Earth after the war. They laughed and played together, unaware of the political complexities that had brought them to this moment. They just knew they were friends. A Valorian child named Kira ran past, chased by two human boys in a game of tag. She was faster than they were, her species naturally more athletic, but they were better at strategy, coordinating to corner her near the playground equipment. She laughed as they caught her, then declared herself it and began chasing them in turn. Their teacher, an elderly man named Mr. Okafor, watched them with a smile. He had lived through the dark days of the Crithian attack, had lost friends at New Providence. He had seen humanity go from victim to protector, and now he watched the next generation growing up in a galaxy that was slowly, painfully, becoming better. 5 years after the Battle of Sol, Ambassador Chen Wei received a visitor at her office on the council station. It was a young Crethian diplomat named Teklar, representing one of the reformed democratic systems. He seemed nervous. Ambassador Chen, he began formally, I wanted to thank you. My homeworld was an imperial colony. We lived under military occupation for 3 generations. When your fleet defeated the empire, you gave us a choice, freedom or continued subjugation. We chose freedom. My people are building a new society now, one based on law and consent rather than force. This would not have been possible without humanity's intervention. Chen smiled warmly. You're welcome. But remember, we didn't give you freedom. We gave you the opportunity to choose it. Your people did the hard work of building something new. That's all you. After he left, Chen stood at the window of her office looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hidden weapons platforms waited in the darkness. Somewhere in deep space, human research teams continued developing technology that other species couldn't imagine. Somewhere, contingency plans were being updated for threats that might never emerge. The galaxy thought it knew humanity's strength now. They had seen the 10,000 ships, seen the railguns and the coordinated tactics. They had seen humans protect the weak and punish the aggressive. They believed they understood the new galactic order, but Chen knew better. She had sat in on classified briefings. She had seen reports that would never be declassified in her lifetime. In the throne room of the Kryvax Imperial Palace, Prince Catharn watched the human message with amusement. Around him, his military commanders shifted nervously, but Catharn only laughed. We're coming, he repeated mockingly. The soft skins threaten us with words. What will they do? Send angry letters? File complaints with the Council? General Zakar, his chief military advisor, was not smiling. My prince, perhaps we should take precautions. The humans have a fleet, small but modern. Catharn waved a dismissive hand. 200 ships at most. We have 10,000. If they are foolish enough to attack, we will crush them as easily as we crushed their pathetic delegation. He turned to face his commanders. The humans are traitors and talkers. They have known only peace since joining the galaxy. They have forgotten how to fight if they ever knew. But across the galaxy, in the intelligence centers of a dozen major civilizations, analysts were beginning to panic. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session, and the chamber was filled with nervous chatter. Ambassador Takren of the Voth Collective rose to speak. Her species had been part of the Council for 3,000 years. We must discuss the human response. Their message is concerning. Ambassador Drexel of the Merchants Guild laughed. It's bluster. The humans are upset naturally, but they'll accept mediation eventually. They always do. Have any of you actually studied human history? The question came from Ambassador Solth, a small insectoid being whose species prided itself on thorough research. The chamber fell quiet. Solth activated a holographic display. I took the liberty of reviewing Earth's historical database. The results are disturbing. Images began to flow across the display. Ancient battles with primitive weapons. Medieval warfare. The World War's nuclear weapons. The Cold War. Conflict after conflict stretching back thousands of years. The humans have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history, Solth said quietly. They developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet within 50 years of achieving industrial technology. They created machines of war so terrible that they agreed never to use them, yet kept them ready for decades as a threat. The chamber had gone completely silent. In a single century, the 20th by their reckoning, they fought 2 wars that killed over 100 million of their own kind. They invented genocide as an industrial process. They built bombs that could level entire cities in seconds. Solth's voice was shaking, and then they stopped. They chose peace. We thought that meant they were peaceful by nature. What are you saying? Takren asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. I'm saying we made a terrible mistake. We assumed their 15 years of peace meant they couldn't fight. We were wrong. They can fight. They've always been able to fight. They just chose not to. And now? The holographic display shifted to show Earth's current military assets. Ships that had seemed small and defensive now looked different in context. Weapon systems that had been dismissed as inadequate suddenly appeared far more sinister. Now they've stopped choosing peace, Solth finished. Back in the Krivax Empire, General Zakar was conducting his own research. What he found made his blood run cold. He burst into Catharn's chamber without announcement. My prince, we have a serious problem. Catharn looked up from his celebration feast with annoyance. What is it? The humans, my prince. I've been reviewing their history. They're not what we thought. They're weak prey animals. No, Zakar said firmly. They're predators who were pretending to be prey. He showed Catharn the same historical records that Solth had presented to the council. The prince's amusement faded with each image. This is propaganda, Catharn said, but his voice lacked conviction. Exaggerated tales to make themselves seem fierce. The Galactic Council verified the records, my prince. They're accurate. The humans spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. They only stopped when they reached the stars. Catharn stood abruptly. It doesn't matter. Our fleet is larger. Our warriors are stronger. We will crush them. But his hand trembled slightly as he spoke. The Galactic Council sent urgent messages to Earth begging for dialogue. The Secretary-General Liu read each one and deleted it without response. Earth had closed all diplomatic channels except one. The demand remained simple and unchanged. Surrender Prince Catharn and his co-conspirators for trial, or face the consequences. Catharn refused. To surrender would show weakness, and the Krivax Empire had never shown weakness. He mobilized the full might of his armada, 10,000 warships gathering in defensive positions around the homeworld. It was the largest military fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Let them come, Catharn declared to his people. We will show them the price of threatening the Krivax. The council sent mediators. The Voth offered to broker peace. The Merchants Guild offered vast sums of credits if both sides would stand down. Dozens of species added their voices, begging Earth to reconsider. Earth's response was silence. Then, 3 days after the massacre, long-range sensors detected something at the edge of Kryvax space. Ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel. Catharn watched the readings with satisfaction. 200 ships as predicted, he said. Deploy the first fleet to meet them. We'll end this quickly. But the sensor readings kept climbing. 300 ships, 500, 1,000. Something's wrong with the sensors, Catharn said. No, my prince, the sensor operator replied, his voice barely a whisper. The readings are accurate. 1,500 ships now, 1,700, 2,000. The throne room fell silent as the full human fleet emerged from FTL. 2,000 vessels, many of designs that had never been seen before. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not yet firing. A transmission came through on all frequencies. The voice was calm, almost emotionless. This is Admiral James Kowalski of the United Nations Earthship Retribution, flagship of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here for Prince Catharn and the 47 co-conspirators who participated in the murder of our delegation. You have 24 hours to surrender them for trial. If you refuse, we will take them by force. This is your only warning. Catharn stared at the display showing the human fleet. 2,000 ships. Where had they come from? How had Earth hidden such a force? They're bluffing, he said. They won't attack. The Council won't allow it. General Zakar looked at his prince with something like pity. My prince, I don't think they care what the Council allows anymore. The 24-hour countdown began. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and waited. In the Galactic Council chamber, ambassadors argued frantically about how to stop what was coming. And on the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Kowalski sat in his command chair watching the timer count down. Sir, his first officer said quietly, they're not going to surrender. No, Kowalski agreed. They're not. Your orders? The Admiral looked at the holographic display showing the Kryvax fleet positioning for battle. 10,000 ships against 2,000. On paper, the humans were outnumbered 5-1. But paper didn't account for human history. It didn't account for 10,000 years of learning how to fight and kill and win. When the timer reaches 0, Kowalski said quietly, we show them what retribution means. The timer reached 0. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then the human fleet moved. Prince Catharn watched from his command center as the human ships suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds. His sensors screamed warnings as thousands of smaller craft launched from the main vessels, moving in coordinated swarms like hunting birds from ancient Kryvax legends. All ships, open fire, Catharn commanded. The Kryvax fleet unleashed a barrage that should have vaporized the first wave of human ships. Energy beams and missiles filled the void of space with deadly light. But the human vessels danced between the attacks, their movements too precise, too perfect. Not a single shot connected. How are they doing that? General Zakar demanded. The answer became clear moments later. The human ships were being guided by something the Kryvax had never used in warfare. Artificial intelligence. Computers calculating trajectories faster than any living mind could process. Predicting enemy fire before it happened. Moving ships in patterns that seemed impossible. The drone swarms reached the Kryvax fleet first. They were small, each one barely larger than a fighter craft, but there were thousands of them. They swarmed over the Kryvax battleships like insects, targeting weapon systems and engines with surgical precision. Explosions bloomed across the Kryvax line as ship after ship lost propulsion or firepower. Return fire! Destroy those drones! Catharn shouted. But for every drone the Kryvax destroyed, 2 more took its place. And behind the drones came the real attack. The human capital ships fired weapons the galaxy had never seen. Massive projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Kinetic kill vehicles carrying no explosives because they didn't need any. When something that massive hits something else at that speed, the energy release is devastating. 3 Kryvax battleships simply ceased to exist, torn apart by impacts that released more energy than nuclear weapons. Admiral Kowalski watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Retribution. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, calling out status reports and target acquisitions. This was what humans had trained for, what they had prepared for even during their 15 years of peace. Deploy the quantum torpedoes, Kowalski ordered. Target their command ships. A new type of weapon streaked across the battlefield. They didn't explode on impact. Instead, they phased partially out of normal space. passing through shields as if they weren't there, then detonating inside the target vessels. The results were catastrophic. Kravak's command ships imploded from within, their crews never even seeing what hit them. But the most terrifying weapon in the human arsenal wasn't physical, it was psychological. Across the Kravak's fleet, communication channels suddenly filled with broadcasts. Not military signals or jamming, but something far more insidious. The broadcasts showed footage of the massacre. Ambassador Chen and her delegation dying while Catharn laughed. But mixed with that footage were other images. Human history, human warfare, human determination. This is what you started, a voice said in perfect Kravax. This is what you chose. The broadcast showed Hiroshima, Dresden, Stalingrad. They showed humans fighting with a ferocity that shocked the Kravax warriors. They showed humans who refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain, who fought on even when outnumbered and outgunned. You killed our innocents, the voice continued. You murdered those who came in peace. Now you face those who come in war. The psychological effect was immediate. The Kravax were warriors bred for combat, but they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. An enemy that approached war not with honor or glory, but with cold, calculated efficiency. Kravax ships began to break formation. Some tried to retreat, others fought on with desperate courage. It made no difference. The human fleet moved through them like a scythe through grain. Within 12 hours, a quarter of the Kravax fleet was destroyed or disabled. The rest were trapped, surrounded by human ships that seemed to be everywhere at once. Catharn watched his mighty armada fall apart, unable to comprehend what was happening. This is impossible, he whispered. We are the Kravax. We are the strongest warriors in the galaxy. You were the strongest warriors, General Zikar replied quietly, until you fought someone who understood war better than you ever could. The human fleet began to move into formation around the Kravax homeworld itself. Billions of Kravax watched from below as the human ships blocked out their stars, creating a perfect blockade. Nothing could get in or out, but the humans didn't fire on the planet. No kinetic bombardment, no orbital strikes. The cities below remained untouched. Why don't they attack? Catharn demanded. A transmission came through. Admiral Kowalski's face appeared on every screen in the Kravax Empire. We are not here to conquer you, he said. We are not here to enslave you. We are here for justice. Surrender Prince Catharn and the 47 conspirators who participated in the murder of our delegation. Do this and no more blood will be spilled. Refuse and we will come down there and take them. Catharn felt his commanders turn to look at him. The choice was his. Continue this war and watch his empire burn or surrender himself for trial. Never, Catharn snarled. I am a prince of the Kravax. I do not surrender to lesser beings. Kowalski's expression didn't change. So be it. The human fleet launched transport ships. Not bombs or missiles, but landing craft carrying thousands of human marines. They descended through the atmosphere in perfect formation, heading directly for the Imperial Palace. Catharn mobilized his personal guard, 10,000 of the finest Kravax warriors, wearing the best armor and carrying the best weapons his empire could produce. They fortified the palace, setting up defensive positions and automated weapons. If the humans wanted him, they would have to fight through a fortress. The human marines landed 3 miles from the palace. There were only 2,000 of them, facing 10,000 Kravax defenders. Catharn watched from his command center, feeling a surge of confidence. Here on the ground, Kravax strength would prevail. The battle for the palace lasted 6 hours. It was broadcast live across the galaxy, every major civilization watching as humans demonstrated another aspect of their nature. They moved through the palace defenses like they had written the manual on urban warfare. Because they had. They had perfected it through centuries of bitter experience. Human marines used tactics the Kravax had never seen. They didn't charge bravely into fire like honorable warriors. They used cover. They flanked. They set traps and ambushes. They turned the palace's own defenses against it. When the Kravax expected frontal assault, the humans came from underground. When the Kravax reinforced one position, the humans struck from another, and they used non-lethal weapons whenever possible. Stun grenades, tranquilizer darts, sonic weapons. They were here for specific targets and they didn't want unnecessary casualties. By the time the human marines reached Catharn's throne room, the Kravax defenders were scattered and broken. The doors burst open and 20 human soldiers entered, weapons raised. Catharn stood from his throne, his own weapon in hand. "You will have to kill me," he snarled. The lead Marine, her face hidden behind her helmet's visor, raised her weapon. But she didn't fire. Instead, she spoke in perfect Krivax. "We don't want to kill you, Prince Catharn. We want justice." "Drop your weapon," Catharn roared and charged. The Marine fired. Not a lethal round, but a tranquilizer powerful enough to drop a Krivax in seconds. Catharn collapsed mid-charge, unconscious before he hit the ground. Within the hour, all 48 conspirators were in human custody. They were loaded onto transport ships and taken to the Retribution. The human fleet began preparations to withdraw. Admiral Kowalski made one final broadcast to the Krivax people and the galaxy. "We came for justice, and we have it. The Krivax Empire is defeated but not destroyed. Your cities stand. Your people live. Remember this mercy, because we will not offer it twice." He paused, his eyes hard. "We gave you 15 years of peace. You mistook mercy for weakness. That mistake ends today. From this moment forward, let every species in this galaxy understand one truth. Humanity does not seek war. But if you bring war to us, if you harm our people, if you kill our innocents, we will respond with everything we have. We will not stop. We will not negotiate. We will not show restraint. This is the Terra Doctrine. Remember it." The broadcast ended. The human fleet jumped to FTL, leaving behind a galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. The Hague had been the center of international justice on Earth for centuries. Now it would serve that purpose for the entire galaxy. The historic Peace Palace had been expanded and modified to accommodate alien physiology. Translators worked around the clock to ensure every word would be understood in dozens of languages. The trial of Prince Catharn would be the most watched event in galactic history. Secretary General Liu stood at the entrance, greeting the arriving ambassadors from across the galaxy. Every member of the Galactic Council had been invited. Most had accepted, though some came reluctantly. They wanted to see how humans dispensed justice. They needed to understand what kind of species they were dealing with now. Ambassador Tekren of the Voth Collective approached Liu with obvious nervousness. "Secretary General, my government wishes to express concern about these proceedings. The Galactic Council has established procedures for such matters." Liu's expression remained neutral but firm. The Galactic Council offered thoughts and condolences. "We are offering justice. You are welcome to observe, Ambassador. That is why you're here." Inside the courtroom, Prince Catharn sat in a specially constructed dock surrounded by human security. His armor had been removed, replaced with simple clothing. He looked smaller somehow, less impressive without the trappings of his position. Next to him sat 47 other Krivax, all facing the same charges. The chief prosecutor was Elena Rodriguez, one of Earth's most respected legal minds. She stood to address the court as cameras broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "Your honors, members of the court, observers from across the stars. Today we begin proceedings in the case of United Earth versus Catharn and others. The charges are simple: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, crimes against sapient beings. These defendants planned and executed the deaths of 200 unarmed diplomatic personnel. They did so publicly, deliberately, and without provocation." Catharn surged to his feet. "This is a mockery. I am a prince. I cannot be judged by prey animals." The head judge, a stern woman named Justice Chen, no relation to the fallen ambassador, banged her gavel. "You will sit down and remain silent until called upon to speak. In this court you are not a prince. You are a defendant, and you will follow the rules of this proceeding." Catharn sat, but his eyes burned with rage. For 3 weeks, the trial proceeded. The prosecution presented evidence methodically, building their case piece by piece. They showed recordings of the planning meetings where Catharn had proposed the massacre. They presented communications showing how he had invited the human delegation specifically to kill them. They demonstrated that every aspect of the event had been premeditated. The galaxy watched, fascinated by human justice. It was nothing like Krivax justice, which was swift and brutal. It was nothing like Voth justice, which focused on restoring balance to society. Human justice was meticulous, thorough, and surprisingly fair. Catharn was given lawyers. He was allowed to present his defense. When he claimed he was following Krivax tradition, the prosecution acknowledged that Krivax culture did value strength and dominance. But they argued that murdering diplomats under the pretense of ceremony violated even Krivax law. They brought In Kryvak's legal experts who confirmed that what Catharn had done was illegal even by his own people's standards. He had violated sacred laws of hospitality. He had brought shame to the Kryvak's empire. The defense tried to argue that cultural differences made the act less heinous. The prosecution countered with a simple question. Did the defendants know the humans would die? Yes. Did they intend for the humans to die? Yes. Did the humans pose any threat that justified killing them? No. That is murder by any definition in any culture. On the 20th day of the trial, the defense called Catharn himself to testify. It was a mistake. Why did you kill the human delegation? The prosecutor asked. Catharn's pride wouldn't let him show weakness even now. To demonstrate Kryvak's superiority, to show the galaxy that we bow to no one. So you murdered 200 unarmed diplomats to make a political statement? I eliminated weakness from the galaxy. You murdered people who came in peace. I destroyed those who thought themselves our equals. The courtroom fell silent. Catharn had just confessed to premeditated murder and explained his motive. His own lawyer put his head in his hands. When the evidence phase concluded, the judges deliberated for 3 days. The galaxy waited. Would human justice be fair, or would it be revenge disguised as law? On the 24th day of the trial, the verdicts were announced. Justice Chen read them in a clear, firm voice. We find Prince Catharn guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, crimes against sapient beings. For these crimes, the sentence is life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Catharn roared in rage, but the guards held him firm. The other 47 defendants received varied sentences based on their level of participation. Those who had merely followed orders received lighter sentences. Those who had actively participated in planning received harsher ones. 3 defendants who had expressed moral objections but been overruled by Catharn were given minimal sentences, with credit for time served. Ambassador Drexel of the Merchants Guild spoke for many when he addressed the Secretary General after the trial. I admit I did not expect this. I thought you would execute them all. Liu shook his head. We're not interested in revenge, Ambassador. We wanted justice. The guilty have been punished. That's enough, but the surprises weren't over. 2 days after the sentencing, Liu made an announcement that shocked the galaxy again. The Kryvak's empire has fractured following the loss of its leadership. Multiple factions are fighting for control. Civilian populations are suffering. Therefore, Earth is launching a humanitarian mission to provide food, medical supplies, and refugee assistance to any Kryvaks who need it. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in confusion when the announcement was broadcast. Ambassador Takren demanded an explanation. You wage war against them and now you offer aid? The human ambassador to the council, Marcus Webb, responded calmly. We waged war against those who murdered our people. The Kryvak civilians didn't kill anyone. They're innocent, and innocent people don't deserve to suffer. But they're your enemies. They were our enemies' subjects. There's a difference. The first human aid ships arrived in Kryvak space a week later. They carried food, medicine, and supplies. They also carried doctors and engineers who began helping repair critical infrastructure. The Kryvak's people, starving and desperate after the Civil War, accepted the help hesitantly at first, then with growing appreciation. A young Kryvak's child, receiving food from a human aid worker, asked a question that would be quoted across the galaxy. Why are you helping us? We killed your people. The aid worker, a woman who had lost her brother in the massacre, knelt down to the child's level. You didn't kill anyone. And my brother wouldn't want me to let children starve because of what someone else did. That image, broadcast across the galaxy, did more to change perceptions of humanity than any battle had. In the Galactic Council, Secretary General Liu formally introduced the Terra Doctrine. It was simple and clear. Any attack on human civilians or diplomatic personnel will be met with immediate and overwhelming military response, followed by legal accountability for those responsible. But we will not punish the innocent for the crimes of their leaders. We will not seek conquest. We seek only justice and peace. The council debated the doctrine for weeks. Some species praised it, others feared it. But 3 species that had been planning aggressive actions against their neighbors quietly canceled those plans. The word spread through the galaxy faster than any transmission could carry it. Humanity didn't fight for territory or resources. They didn't fight for glory or honor. They fought for principle, and that made them more dangerous than any empire, because principles don't negotiate. Principles don't compromise, but it also made them more trustworthy because principles are consistent. If you didn't threaten humanity's people, humans would be the galaxy's most reliable friends. If you did threaten them, they would be your worst nightmare. The galaxy was learning a lesson that would reshape interstellar politics for generations. Peace wasn't weakness. Mercy wasn't the same as inability to fight. And sometimes the most dangerous beings in the universe were the ones who chose not to use their full strength until you gave them no other choice. The trial ended. Justice had been served, and the galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. 5 years had passed since the trial. The Galactic Council chamber looked the same, but everything else had changed. Ambassador Marcus Webb sat in the Security Directorate section, a position humanity had earned not through politics, but through demonstrated capability. The chamber was filled with representatives from 200 species, but when Webb stood to speak, everyone listened. The Council recognizes Earth's representative, the speaker announced. Webb activated a holographic display showing galactic conflict statistics. In the 5 years since the implementation of the Terra Doctrine, galaxy-wide conflicts have decreased by 40%. Attacks on diplomatic personnel have dropped to near zero. Border disputes are being resolved through negotiation rather than force. Ambassador Tikrin, who had become something of a friend to Webb over the years, added her support. The Voth Collective confirms these findings. The galaxy has become measurably more peaceful. But not everyone was pleased with humanity's new role. Ambassador Krell of the Thaxian Dominion, a species known for aggressive expansion, stood with barely concealed anger. The Council has become paralyzed by fear of human intervention. Species cannot pursue their legitimate interests without wondering if Earth will object. Webb turned to face Krell directly. By legitimate interests, do you mean the 3 colony worlds you were planning to invade before reconsidering? The same worlds that asked for Earth's protection, which we granted through mutual defense treaties? Krell's scales flushed purple with rage, but he had no response. The intelligence was accurate. The Thaxians had been planning expansion through conquest, but the threat of human intervention had made them reconsider. They had chosen diplomacy instead, and while it wounded their pride, it had saved countless lives. On Earth, Admiral Kowalski walked through the newly expanded Earth Defense Fleet Academy. He was retired from active duty now, but he lectured here twice a month, teaching the next generation of officers. His students were both human and alien. Dozens of species had asked to send officers to train at human military academies, wanting to understand human tactical thinking. A young Krivax cadet approached Kowalski after his lecture on tactical decision-making. Her name was Sreth, and she had been a child during the war with Earth. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you spare my people? After what Prince Catharn did, you could have destroyed us. No one would have stopped you." Kowalski regarded her thoughtfully. "Because war isn't about destruction, cadet. It's about achieving objectives. Our objective was justice, not genocide. Your people weren't our enemies. Catharn was." Sreth nodded slowly. "That's why I'm here. To learn this way of thinking. In Krivax tradition, we saw strength as the only virtue. But you showed us something else. That real strength is knowing when not to use your power." "That's a good lesson," Kowalski agreed. "But remember the other side of it too. We chose not to destroy your people, but we could have. That choice has to mean something." The conversation reflected a broader transformation happening across the galaxy. The Krivax remnant states, after 5 years of civil war and rebuilding, had petitioned Earth for assistance. The debate in the UN had been fierce. Many humans still mourned the 200 who had died. Some wanted nothing to do with the Krivax ever again, but in the end, Earth had voted to help. Human engineers and aid workers returned to Krivax space, this time not as conquerors, but as partners in reconstruction. The relationship was complicated, built on tragedy and war, but it was growing into something unexpected: respect. At the United Nations headquarters, a new memorial had been erected. It stood in the center of the plaza, visible to all who entered. The statue was of Ambassador Sarah Chen, her hand extended in a gesture of greeting. The plaque beneath read, "She offered a hand in friendship. They chose violence. Remember the cost." Every day, thousands of beings from across the galaxy visited the memorial. They came to pay respects. They came to learn the story. They came to understand what had happened when someone mistook human mercy for weakness. In the Galactic Council archives, the footage of the massacre and the subsequent war had become required viewing for all diplomatic personnel. It was a lesson no one wanted to learn the hard way again. But perhaps the most significant change was invisible to casual observation. It existed in the minds of every species that had watched humans wage war and then make peace. It existed in the calculations of military strategists who now factored in potential human response before recommending action. It existed in the quiet conversations of leaders who asked themselves, what would Earth do? Before making decisions. The Krivax Civil War had finally ended 2 years earlier, with 3 separate states emerging from the old empire. Each had approached Earth for recognition and support. The negotiations had been tense, with many humans unwilling to forgive. But at the signing ceremony for the Krivax Reconciliation Treaty, something remarkable happened. The leader of the largest Krivax state, Premier Vithok, did something no Krivax leader had ever done. He apologized. "We were wrong," Vithok said, his words broadcast across the galaxy. "We believed strength meant domination. We believed mercy was weakness. We were wrong. The humans taught us that true strength is measured not by who you can defeat, but by who you choose not to fight. They could have destroyed us. They chose not to. We will never forget that choice." Secretary General Liu, now in his final year of service, accepted the apology with quiet dignity. "We hope all species can learn from this. Peace is not the absence of strength. Peace is the choice to use strength for building rather than destroying." On the anniversary of the massacre, humans held memorials across Earth and on every human colony. But they also did something else. They hosted open dialogues with other species about conflict resolution, justice, and peace. The sessions were attended by hundreds of species, all wanting to understand the human approach to war and peace. A young ambassador from a minor species asked the question many were thinking. How do you balance it? The willingness to fight with the desire for peace? Admiral Kowalski, attending as a guest speaker, provided the answer that would be quoted for generations. You remember the cost. Every time we consider using force, we remember what war means. We remember the dead. We remember the destruction. That memory makes us careful. But we also remember what happens when evil goes unchecked. That memory makes us vigilant. Peace through strength means being capable of war but choosing peace. It means being willing to fight but hoping you never have to. That's the balance. In his private quarters, Kowalski kept a photo from the Retribution's final mission. It showed his bridge crew after the successful capture of Catharn. They weren't celebrating. They looked tired, sad, aware of what they had been forced to do. He kept the photo to remind himself that victory in war wasn't something to celebrate. It was simply something that sometimes had to be done. Marcus Webb was preparing to step down as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. His replacement would be David Park, who had survived the massacre by missing the diplomatic mission due to illness. Park had spent 5 years preparing for this role, driven by survivors' guilt and determination to honor those who had died. At his final council session, Webb delivered a speech that summarized Earth's position. 5 years ago, many of you learned something about humanity that scared you. You learned we could fight. You learned we could win. But I hope you've also learned something else in these 5 years. We don't want to fight. We want to build. We want to explore. We want to learn and share and grow together. The Terra Doctrine isn't a threat. It's a promise. Leave us in peace and we will be your friends, your partners, your allies. Harm our people and you will face justice. It's that simple. The council chamber was silent for a moment after he finished. Then, one by one, representatives from across the galaxy stood in a show of respect. Not all of them. The Thaxians remained seated, as did a handful of other aggressive species. But most stood, acknowledging the truth in Webb's words. That night, on a dozen worlds, military academies taught human tactics. Diplomatic schools studied human negotiation strategies. Children learned about the Terra Doctrine in history classes. The galaxy had been fundamentally changed by the events that began with a massacre and ended with a new understanding of what peace really meant. In a small apartment on the rebuilt Krivax homeworld, an elderly Krivax who had served in Catharn's guard sat with his grandchildren. They asked him about the war, as children always do. Tell us about the humans, grandfather. Are they really as fierce as the stories say? The old soldier thought carefully before answering. Yes, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that they're fierce only when they have to be. The rest of the time, they're kind. They're generous. They're fair. That's what makes them special. That's why the galaxy is better with them in it. On Earth, in the council chambers where humanity had decided to go to war, Secretary General Liu prepared to leave office. His successor was already chosen, a young woman named Michelle Okafor who had been a child when the massacre happened. She would guide humanity's role in the galaxy for the next term. Any advice? She asked Liu as they walked through the halls one final time.